As movement gets more complex, it becomes necessary to use morph sequences to compile that movement back down into something that's simple and easy to calculate inside Messiah. There are many ways that we can use morph sequences. If you are familiar with the plugin Point Oven or the MDD format, you've already used morph sequences in your projects. All a morph sequence is a collection of morph targets that morph from one to the other. As one fades in, the other one fades out, and it moves down the line. The MDD format stores these morphs in one file, and it transitions from each morph for every frame. If you have a complex motion that you need to reduce down to a sequence, then you would bake that motion into point movement, and that point movement gets applied to the character. In our case, we have an eyelid that has to move 100 degrees around a very spherical eyeball, and this eye, to accomplish this with regular morph targets, is almost impossible. Morphs move linearly from one state to the other, so it would clip right through the eye. And we can increase the complexity of this rig by using other effects such as bulge or trying our delta morphs, as explained in other video CDs. But here's another way of doing that. Modeling programs have become so well featured that you can practically model your animations inside the program as a morph sequence. I'm using a pretty free program here, which is Wings, but other programs have access to data histories, and you can adjust the history over time, and all you're doing is you're creating a morph target for every frame that you need to move. Now we can treat the morph targets as specific keyframes, and we only need a few keyframes to move around the edge of this eye. We don't need a frame for every single angle. We just need a few keyframes to define the curve, and we're going to go into Messiah and use the morph targets to define how this curve moves through the morphs. So it becomes a lot easier once we start. Now this is the claymation version of modeling. We're going to do it all by hand for these eyeballs because we have the tools that can make this a lot easier, and we don't have to go into several effects inside Messiah to generate the behavior we need for these eyelids. So I'm going to close the eyelids by hand, and we're going to use three morph targets. We have the open state, which is the default state of the model. We have a quarter closed, 3/4 closed, and then the final close. So we're just going to do this sequentially by moving this a quarter of the way there, duplicating the mesh, and then moving it another quarter of the way there, and duplicating the mesh, so we have a very rough sequence. So first things first, let's duplicate this head, hide the original, change the eyes to wireframe so we have a good reference, and this head copy is going to get renamed to head blink 1. So we're going to move this a third, not a quarter, just a third. So switch to faces mode. Just going to pick one of the faces and lock the eyes so we can't select them. So all we're picking are the faces. Also note that we're in mirror mode here. I only have half of a model, so we can do the blinks both at the same time, and as I export this model, it's going to export the mirrored side as well. So when we export both the head and our morph targets, the points will line up and our morphs will work symmetrically. So the first thing I need to do is move this first portion of the eyelid. I'm going to pick the faces, use the A key to center the selection on the first section of the eyelid. Right click and rotate, but I'm going to right click. If you look at the status window down at the bottom, it'll tell you what you can do to the model. So right click, if you right click on rotate, it'll tell you that you can pick an axis and then right click to execute. I'm going to pick an axis by selecting 2 points in space, and it's going to draw a line, and that's where my hinge is going to be. Right click to execute. Let's move this down a third, and so far so good. Now it's still out of the page there, but I need to move that out just a bit. So let's move this freely up and make sure it is centered over the eye. Spacebar to deselect, switch to edges mode this time, pick the next group, and since these are evenly spaced, I can keep them evenly spaced between the new positions and the old positions. So from here, right click on rotate again, go back to points, pick the same 2 points here to recreate my hinge axis, right click and move these. So there's the third. Spacebar to deselect, pick the next edges, and since I haven't changed the mesh at all, I haven't made any alterations since the last action I did, I'll repeat the action with the D key. I'll move those, and then the last one here, since this is skin, it is going to pull just a little bit the fold here. So repeat my action and move those. So there's the third way mark. So head blink 1. So duplicate this now to head blink 2, hide the original one, and rename this one head blink 2. Head blink 2 does the same thing. We'll just repeat our actions here. So pick our faces. So right click and right click on rotate. Go to points mode, define our hinge axis. And right click to execute and move this another third down. You can see that the eyelid here is not moving the same distance as the eyeball. So as we move this another third, let's move that freely back out again. Check our work. Make sure we're good on all of the axes here. Okay, spacebar to deselect. Go into edge mode. Now pick our edges again. Right click, rotate, right click. Go into points and pick a hinge axis. Move that down, and remember to keep these evenly spaced across the eye from the start point. Spacebar to deselect. Pick the next section. D to repeat since we didn't do anything else. And keep going. D to repeat and rotate that just a little bit. And now, because the eye is stuck farther out, we need to do some manual adjustments. So spacebar to deselect, pick our edges. Let's move those freely out until we can't see the eyeball. Or just go into tweak mode, which is underneath the tools, and I have that set to \. So tools, tweak, go into points and just move the points around ever so slightly to get them to finish wrapping around. You can even move it into magnet mode. Now I have matching points down at the bottom eyelid that we can move these to. So I can go to magnet. If I look down at the bottom here, it says magnet on is 1, so tap the 1 key. And I have a fall off on this that you can adjust with a plus and minus. I'm going to match these up to the lower points here. Just make them aim towards the lower points as they're moving. So there's the second state. Let's right click to get out of the tweak mode. If we need to go back into the original blink, we can do that. Just hide head blink 2, go back to head blink 1. Go back into the tweak mode with the \ key, or select it from the menu, and use the magnet tool to tweak these around so that they are on the right path, being directed towards the corresponding points on the lower lid. So the lower and upper lids will match up on their faces. Okay. Let's hide that. Our blink 2 looks pretty good. So the next one, let's duplicate blink 2. This will be blink 3. Rename that one blink 3. And then continue closing the eyelids. Go back to face mode here. Let's pick our faces just on the corner. Use the A key to center the selection. That will allow it to not clip through the mesh during display. Do the same rotation. Right click, rotate, right click. Go to the points, pick our hinge again. Right click and just bend that down until it matches. Now we got pretty close with those, so let's move this freely until they're lined up. And then do the same thing to the other edges here. Let's pick our edges. Right click, rotate, pick our axes again, and move these down so they're evenly spaced. Use the space bar to deselect, and go into tweak mode, and we'll just move these points out so that they work correctly. Now since this is in subdivision surface mode, we need to Shift Tab into Sub D to see if we have any clipping. And we do have clipping, so we need to move these up out of the way of the clipping. I'm just doing some quick adjustments here to get these so they match up better to the lower lid. Pull them out. Shift Tab. Looks like we don't have any clipping going on, so that's good. So let's check blink 2. So let's hide blink 3, go to blink 2. Shift Tab. Oh, we have some clipping on here, but not too much. So we'll just tweak that just a bit. Looks good. Let's hide that. Let's go to blink 1. Shift Tab, turn it into MetaNerbs. We don't have any clipping on there, so it looks good. So now we have 3 morph targets in the original head that we need to export into Messiah. So right click, get out of that tweak mode, go into object mode. We'll start with the head, pick the head object, file, export selected as an OBJ into our Advanced Facial 2 Animated Morphs Objects folder. We'll just call this one Head. Deselect that, select Head Blink 1, export selected as an OBJ, call this Head underscore Blink 1. Deselect that, go to Head Blink 2, export selected, Head Blink 2. Go to Head Blink 3, export selected, Head Blink 3. So now we have our morph sequence that looks like it's going to work. Let's save this scene. Just save as. We'll just call this Big Eyes 1.